This is to be the first of a series we're calling Death Debates, where, obviously, we present arguments for and against particularly difficult, controversial or dividing death topics. The purpose is not to necessarily come to a conclusion, and I certainly don't have the answers, but to bring awareness and make you really think about some of these topics in ways you may not have thought about them before. Now, onwards. Archaeology is the study of human activity through the recovery and analysis of material culture, including records of artifacts, architecture, biofacts and ecofacts, sites and cultural landscapes. Places like Egypt's Valleys of the Kings, Italy's Pompeii, China's terracotta warriors and England's plague pits are all synonymous with what we know and view as archaeology. It developed as its own field of study out of antiquanism, the study of antiques in the past in Europe during the 19th century. Today we are talking specifically about modern day archaeology and the digging up of the dead as opposed to other artifacts. We've got to narrow the line or focus down somehow. So let's debate digging up the dead. Side A, digging up the dead is okay. Now, full disclosure, when I was a teen, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I love history, and the idea of being able to hold something that someone 1,000 years ago also held was fascinating to me. It explains why I have so many antique books. So I get it. I get why archaeology is something people want to participate in. Now, with this in mind, here are the arguments regularly put forth that digging up the dead is okay. The purpose of archaeology is to learn more about past societies and the development of the human race. Often, archaeology and digging up the dead provides the only means to learn of their existence and the behaviours of people of the past. This is the quintessential argument in favour of archaeology in general, to learn about past people where there is no written record. It's a very simple, obvious reason. There's no real reason to elaborate on that one. Next up, digging up the dead leads the public to appreciate archaeological sites, which often leads to improved protection from encroaching development and other threats. These sites often lead to tourism, which can add a big financial boost to the area's economy. The next point we see a lot, and that's the exhumation and relocation from building sites. Often these are mass graves or lost cemeteries. We often hear about new plague pits being discovered in the UK when a train station is undergoing upgrades, or old cemeteries being found under land when universities start building more on them. So the argument here is that leaving the bodies where they are would be unethical, because they would like to be crushed or destroyed by machinery and other site works. Now, similar to this point in that the argument is for protection, is the removing of the dead from protected archaeological sites to protect them from war, armed conflicts, looting and natural disasters, which we have seen done in places like Libya, Syria, Egypt and Lebanon. Indeed, in the past 20 years, this argument has become newsworthy as both the Taliban and ISIS destroyed important historical artifacts on a mass scale, though it is unknown if any ancient bodies were amongst this carnage. Lastly is the exhumation of bodies upon it becoming very evident of a historical crime. This includes the mass graves from Stalin's purges discovered all around the former USSR, and most recently the discovery of mass graves of Canadian First Nation children at the sites of former residential schools. In this case, the argument is that the people in these mass graves should be dug up in order to be reburied elsewhere in a more respectful, culturally appropriate location. You could say that the arguments for digging up the dead could be summarised as those for a seemingly practical purpose, learning or protection. Now, onto the other side of the coin. Side B, digging up the dead is not okay. The basis for a majority of arguments for not digging up the dead can be brought back to the fact that archaeology is a white majority field. I've looked at 4 different surveys and it's anywhere between 80 to 90% white. Why is this a problem? There are a number of significant issues with it, but for this particular video, the problem is that white archaeologists are digging up people in very obviously not white countries. You know, usually the same countries that their ancestors colonized and then promptly murdered the majority. Now, many will argue that this unethical behavior was only done by people working in the field over past decades, but there really isn't much to reference by way of change, apart from a bit more paperwork that these researchers have to go through to gain access to a site. The theory may have changed, but the practice and end result is still the same. The next argument, I'll phrase it as a question. Why are archaeologists digging up ancient people who they know believed that disrupting the dead will impact the afterlife? For example, you will hear archaeologist after archaeologist going on and on about their passion for the ancient Egyptians, how much respect they have for their beliefs, the culture that they had, and the ancients' belief in the afterlife and all they had to go through to get there. But instead of protecting and honouring these beliefs, they choose to go the direct opposite and dig them up. So how much respect do they really have for that culture and their dead? Next is the counter-argument to digging up bodies in order to protect them from war, natural disasters and looting. Is it really better to dig them up and keep them in a lab as opposed to them being destroyed on their own land? And how many bodies is enough? Close to 1 trillion people have lived and died on Earth. Are we really going to dig them all up and study them? Many are and have been destroyed over thousands of years by various means. Is the argument that they need to be dug up to protect them really about protection, or simply a convenient, noble-sounding excuse to conduct another dig? Following on from this last argument, which is that while archaeology is the study of humans in the past, how much more can we really learn, and what is the relevance of doing so? Why do we need to know every small detail? Some have linked this back to death anxiety in the archaeologists themselves, that perhaps they are worried they'll be forgotten in death, and so they're projecting this fear onto the already deceased. Others link it to the current uptake of students studying in the field, who have been told to follow their dreams, and now they expect a regular paycheck out of these degrees, meaning that these digs have to keep on going regardless of ethics. Questions. So these are the main arguments for and against, and it raises some distinct questions. If we agree with the argument that white people digging up non-white people is abhorrent, is it okay for current day British archaeologists to dig up the mass graves of plague victims within the UK? Is it okay for current day archaeologists from Egypt to dig up the bodies of ancient Egyptians? Is digging up ancient people within your own culture okay? It's a question that's been raised across every continent. Are bodies people or objects? If they are people, do they have rights? If they're objects, who do they belong to? Every country has different laws and values regarding the dead. Many of these laws have changed and continue to change. Indeed, most countries haven't even decided whether someone who has died yesterday is a person or an object, let alone someone who died 1,000 years ago. Lastly, should the field of archaeology be cancelled, or does it still serve a purpose? What are your thoughts on this debate? Let us know in the comments. And heads up, we'll be doing another death debate video around keeping bodies in museums. So if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe, add us on Facebook, Instagram, and now TikTok to be the first to know when that video comes out. It also really helps the channel. Thanks for watching from Gary and I. Now go talk death.